Resball Presentation by Ming and Danielle. Our topic is the absence of opportunities and resources in Indigenous communities.
Introduction. Indigenous communities often struggle with the absence of opportunities and resources, a systemic issue that affects many systems, including education, healthcare, and economic development. The absence of adequate resources undermines the cultural heritage and determination of Indigenous communities, as depicted in the movie Resball, is shown through the challenges of Jimmy's mom, Gloria, who faces hardships finding opportunities to make a living. Her struggles highlight the social and economic hardships that result from the deeply embedded colonialism evident in communities on reserves. Addressing this issue is essential in empowering the ability of these communities to maintain their cultural identity and practice their sovereignty as depicted in Resball. Article Breakdown. Introduction to article. I Am Exhausted. Everyday Occurrences of Being Native American by Stephanie Masta focuses on the common struggles Native Americans face with their identity through their day-to-day interactions with classmates, friends, and faculty. The purpose of this article was to create a conversation focused on the experiences of Native American students, examining the challenges of these students through Indigenous-centered research methods by conducting a study using small stories narrative.
Brief methodology. The author Massa provides a quantitative research design, allowing participants to review their written and recorded experience for accuracy and to include any additional information they wish. Keeping her data centered around Indigenous voices. She states that a large amount of research was collected. However, she focused specifically on the small stories participants shared about their daily lives. To guarantee authenticity, she refused to merge different narratives together. Thus, the experiences given from other Indigenous students were completely unedited.
Key findings in page 1 to 7. In the introduction, Stephanie Masta states she was put into a program for students who come from underrepresented populations. However, no one was actually interested in increasing her representation. She collaborated with other Native American students to share their similar experience throughout their post-secondary education, facing the effects of the long history of race-based discrimination. Colonialism. Masta states one of the other products of colonialism is the loss of freedom to exist as a Native American person in almost any sphere, which is most prominent in higher education. The hardships Native American students face are directly mirrored in their relationship with social interaction and institutions as they try to fight assimilation. Microaggressions. What are microaggressions? They are brief, verbal, behavioral, and environmental degradations towards racialized people. Although usually unintentional, they have detrimental effects on the victims. The specific types of microaggressions Indigenous people in the United States face are typically directly related to social-political dominance, specifically denying sovereignty within tribes or attempts at assimilation. Studying everyday occurrences. Stephanie Masta conducted a study using emphasis on storytelling found in Indigenous methodologies. She allows other Native American students to share their small stories about attending higher education in a predominantly white campus.
Key findings on page 8 to 14. Everyday occurrences. This section looks over stories of numerous Indigenous students in predominantly white campuses and how it makes them feel about their identity. Many students talked about having to constantly defend and prove it. The experience of ongoing colonization. Bradboy defines colonization as the idea of European American thought, knowledge, and power structures dominating present-day society. It also mentions how deeply entrenched colonial ideology is within our education system. Defending Native identity. The text describes white supremacy as the established European or Western way of doing things, with the belief that it has intellectual superiority over non-Western things, claiming that it manifests itself in specific types of microaggressions. Moving forward. Historically, research that is typically gathered in Indigenous spaces do not respect these marginalized communities, nor create purposeful research analysis. stating that information often reflects a Western worldview instead of true Indigenous experiences. Scene analysis. The scene begins in the kitchen, and Gloria claims that Heather is just an exception and not the rule. Jimmy criticizes her for giving up. Gloria argues from her experience, stating that
the higher you go, the greater the fall. The sooner you realize that, the better off you'll be.
initially, her dialogue implies her alleged knowledge about how futures can only be built with resources and privilege. Her beliefs are connected to the idea that U.S. policies and practices for Indigenous American communities are still rooted in white supremacy. Brave Boy explains that this leaves many Indigenous peoples having to constantly defend themselves against the idea that Western ways of living are the only way to live. This reveals why Indigenous communities tend to receive less education and athletic resources compared to other groups. Having to fight against specific types of microaggressions in everyday experience may cause Indigenous peoples to wonder if their dreams are even possible to begin with. This explains why Gloria has trouble coming to terms with Jimmy's passion for basketball. The broader significance is that carrying harmful beliefs will continue to motivate white supremacy, which is the initial cause of the absence of resources for Indigenous peoples. To conclude, the lack of opportunities for these marginalized communities often gets mistaken for a lack of ability. Thus, the goal is to challenge stereotypes and advocate for equitable resources for Indigenous communities.
Scene analysis. Jimmy challenges Gloria's views when he is taken to the free throw line, given the opportunity to win the championships. He imagines his mom sitting in front of him, discouraging him by saying, "That's the thing about natives. No matter how hard we try, we always find a way to lose." Jimmy opposes her views by saying only one way to find out, and taking the shot despite her strong beliefs that he will lose. This scene in Resball shows how Jimmy confronts the deeply set negativity and lack of faith in Indigenous communities due to lack of resources and opportunities. The phrase, "we always find a way to lose," is internalized oppression, reflecting the history of Indigenous people being destined for failure, which is often caused by the very little resources on reserves. Her line reflects the long history of the broken treaties between the federal government and tribal governments, and how Indigenous people never received remuneration that was legally owed to them as a part of those treaties, rejecting the legal rights of Native American communities. Gloria consistently expresses her strong belief in Indigenous peoples always finding a way to lose as a result of the white supremacy affecting her ancestors constantly throughout history. Although Gloria is not necessarily trying to be mean in this scene, she is likely expressing a fear that she has faced from her own experiences and the trauma she has seen her community face. Gloria has seen firsthand how the system is always working against Indigenous communities as a result of colonialism. Masta highlights the legacy of white supremacy, causing Native Americans to live with social and cultural isolation daily. Gloria's beliefs are deeply affected by the isolation that she herself faces as a Native American, unable to work outside the reserves, resulting in her lack of faith towards Jimmy as a basketball player. As a response, Jimmy still pursues his dreams of basketball, and his response, "only one way to find out," directly opposes her views. He refuses to accept the limitations pushed on him and his community, and he is determined to challenge the belief that he will lose no matter what, simply because he is Native American. His free throw is a symbol for hope and resilience as he is determined to prove his mom wrong. Jimmy refuses to be limited by the lack of opportunities that held his family and his community back. The broader significance of this scene is that Gloria's beliefs highlight how the absence of resources and opportunities enhance her feeling of hopelessness and internalized oppression. She grew up easily believing that success is always out of reach because of the hardships she has been seeing her community face for years. Jimmy, determined to take the shot, shows resilience to overcome the systemic barriers that held his mom back.
To conclude, this presentation looks over the lack of opportunities and resources for Indigenous communities and how it connects to the experiences of Jimmy and Gloria in the movie Res Ball. The article I Am Exhausted, Everyday Occurrences of Being Native American by Steffi Masta uses unedited Indigenous experiences to emphasize ongoing colonization and microaggressions in everyday life. The first scene analysis defines white supremacy along with its impacts and how it dominates Jimmy's mom's beliefs. Our second analysis talks about Gloria's eternalized oppression and how Jimmy confronts the lack of faith in Indigenous communities by refusing to let limited resources restrict him. These two investigations reveal how the absence of resources and opportunities affects these marginalized communities.